the word of the Lord.
Good afternoon, everyone. It is so good to be with you. I am absolutely delighted that I get to talk with you and be with you again today. I want to start today with a bit of a story, and it's a story about my dog. Now, most of you probably have never met my dog, so I'm going to describe her a little bit. She's called Lucy. She's about 15 years old now. We've had her about 9 years. She's a mix. We think Beagle Lab, about 40 pounds. And before we had her, she was on a farm, on a dog farm. So when we rescued her, when she joined our family, she had experienced quite a lot of trauma. And this means that while she's very affectionate, she's also very protective. And there's certain things that even in the 9 years that we have had her, still make her very uncomfortable. So sudden movements or feeling trapped makes her feel very uncomfortable. And sudden movements usually are connected to little people. And trapped may be the way she's tied up or not kind of seeing a way out. I want to tell you something that happened about 2 weeks ago. About 2 weeks ago, one of my nephews really wanted to pet her. And he knew that he had to approach her very gently and very carefully. And so he did that. He came to her side and he gently patted her head. And he did it 2 times and it was all good. And then he got really excited because this nephew is 8 years old. And so he got really excited and he's like, look, 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 see, it's working. It's also working. And then he went to pat her a 3rd time and he forgot. He forgot about the whole thing about being gentle, and he moved from beside her to in front of her face and kind of quickly and suddenly put his hand down. And you can imagine what happened next. And that is that my dog kind of nipped at him. And so almost caused a family incident. I'm glad to report there was no skin broken. He was very shocked. But the reason I wanted to tell this story is that for me, there's a lot in there when we think about gentleness and about how gentleness is a relational concept. It is not something that is in isolation. It's always about how we are relating to someone else or how God is relating to us. And so in this area of gentleness, the other reason I wanted to tell the story is because we often think there's sort of a stereotype that the kind of people or places that we should be gentle is only with children and animals. Like if you think like stereotypically, where are you gentle? It's with children and animals. That's why sometimes people have even thought that gentleness is like a feminine trait. So there's a bit of a feminine bias to it. I'm going to, as we go through this time together, you're going to see that this is not a concept that's limited to how we work with animals or how we work with children, or it's really a broader relational concept of how we should be with one another. Another stereotype that sometimes happens is people associate this word gentle with the word gentleman. That's that old-fashioned, maybe chivalrous word, right? Like, so nice, he held the door, he's being a gentleman, right? And so that word actually has some really positive connotations. You know, in the best sense, it's looking out for someone in terms of looking at them with respect and with honor. But unfortunately, that term, being a gentleman, also has gotten tied up more recently, not just with being chivalrous, but sort of some of those patriarchal traditions where the actions are less about respect and honoring the other and more about exerting power over another person. Now here I think lies the key to understanding how the Bible describes and understands gentleness. And that's the word power. Because at its core, I think gentleness is about how we use power, how God uses power, and how we use power in relationship with each other. So of course, As we heard read, and as we hear week in and week out, if you've been at Church at the Mission before, we know that Jesus is described as both gentle and powerful. Jesus is the God-man, and Jesus's God-man's power is so big that he can reverse even death. And yet, he is gentle. So this tells us right away that gentle is not about being weak, and it's also not about being without power. It's very much about what we do with the power that we have. So gentleness is about how we show, how we share our power in relationship with other people. Now, you might be thinking at this point, Sandra, I have no power. I'm not important. I'm not Jesus. I'm not special. I don't have a lot of money. I don't have a fancy job. I have no power. Now, if those are your thoughts right now, I want to just ask you to pause that critical and negative thinking, because that may be how you feel, but that is not how the Bible describes you as an adopted child of God, and it is not how God sees you. So you may be feeling that way. A lot of society may be pushing you to feel that way, but that is not how God sees you, not how the Bible describes you. Very specifically, one of the readings we just heard read in Proverbs says, a gentle answer can turn away wrath. So right there, we can see that all of us have power in how we use our words. Everybody who's listening or watching today has power in how they choose to use your words. Rich, poor, healthy, sick, skin tone, none of that matters. We all have the choice in how we use our words. And that in and of itself is a form of power. So when you're talking or relating to another person, you can choose to ask a question like, hey, tell me more about that, rather than make an accusation when somebody says something. You can choose to encourage rather than belittle someone else. You can choose to accept that someone else might have a different point of view and not have to argue if you're right. All of these are choices that we have in relationship to other people, choices that are ways that we exert power through our words. Gentleness is so much more than how we treat animals or small children. It's how we treat young and old alike. It's how we are in relationship with everybody around us. Let's look at the classic passage that William also read a little part of there earlier, and that is Matthew 11, verses 28 to 30. I'm going to read it for you here from the New International Version. Come to me, these are Jesus's words, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Come to me, Jesus says, for I am gentle and humble in heart. Notice how Jesus is using this language and talking about gentleness in explaining how he interacts with us when we feel tired and overwhelmed, when we are toiling, when we are weary, when we are burdened. He promises that he's going to offer us rest because he self-identifies as being gentle and humble in our interaction with us. Isn't that amazing? That we can hear this promise that when we feel like we are at our wits' end and we come to God, there is no harsh answer waiting for us. We have gentleness. It's a way that Jesus shows us his grace. Gentleness is a way that we receive grace in our lives. I want you to imagine for a minute what that might look like in everyday practice, not just receiving it from God, but how we might extend that to others. So just imagine for a minute, if you will, that you're coming to Young Street Mission to pick up a meal. On a long, hot day, the TTC that you took to get there was so full that there was someone sitting right next to you and they did not have their mask on properly. And you could like see they were breathing through their nose and you felt really uncomfortable. And so you were like, I just need to get out of here. I don't feel very safe. And you get to YSM and it's sunny and you are thirsty and there's a line. And when you finally get to the front of the line, the person behind the table looks you in the eye. Now here's the moment of choosing how we're going to relate to someone that we don't know necessarily. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. How would gentleness look there? I mean, you could very easily, given all the circumstances that's described, feel very frustrated, feel bothered and hot and be like, oh my gosh, why is this taking so long? How come you don't have my favorite meal? How come there's no chicken today? Can't believe you guys. You could very easily do that out of the emotions that most of us would be feeling after the circumstances I described. Or you could say, hey, it's a hot day, isn't it? Thanks for the meal. And that's just one small example of how words can make such a big difference and how there may be gentle words that you could choose or not in action. Now, earlier in this service, we heard a song. It was a song about God's kindness. And obviously, as we've been going through the fruit of the Spirit, we've been going through all of the different fruit of the Spirit this summer, and kindness is another one of the fruit of the Spirit. And you might wonder, well, how are kindness and gentleness different? They seem about the same to me. How do I know which is which, or, why are they two? Are they just saying the same thing? Now, both are definitely qualities, like character qualities. Kindness is more about friendliness and generosity and compassion, where gentleness is described more as being tender or having moderation in your action. It's about not being harsh or severe. And later on in the fruit of the Spirit, you're going to hear about self-control. And self-control is about knowing when not to act. But gentleness is knowing how to act. So kindness, gentleness, self-control, they are all linked. They are the fruit of the Spirit. They're how when God's Spirit comes upon us, our character is changed and we can be empowered to make different choices even when we feel frustrated and at our wits' end, because God resides within us by His Spirit and can help us to become a little bit more like Jesus. Here's a couple other ways that people have described the difference, because it's, I know, a little tricky to tease out. This is what one person said. It said, it would seem that kindness is more of a singular action, whereas gentleness is more of a way of life. For example, this person writes, I have seen nasty people be kind, but they most certainly were not gentle. But I've never seen a truly gentle person be unkind. So that person kind of sees gentleness as an approach, almost as a way of extending grace. Here's how someone else put it. Kindness shows benevolence or generosity, whereas gentleness shows tenderness. And the example they used was this: I can be kind to a woman on the corner in need of food by providing her with food. I can be gentle with her by handling her frailty, her fears, her deficits, her trust with great care. Same action, one is an approach, one is the act itself. In the end, the difference between these fruit of the Spirit is less important than we try to practice them. Both that we receive them from God first and then try to extend them to our neighbor. We receive them when we are tired and angry and upset and anxious. That's when Jesus describes He's going to treat us gently. And so that is when the challenge for us is to extend that to others at the very time when either we feel that way or the person we're interacting with is expressing themselves in that way. And the good news in all of this sermon series is that we don't express these gifts without first receiving them. We receive them in abundance, minute by minute, day by day, from God's self, through the power of the Spirit. So we never have to make it up ourselves. If we look at Jesus and we follow his patterns, we are going to walk in those ways. But it is a choice that we make. It's a choice that we make so that when we face someone or we ourselves are feeling tired or upset or anxious, we can make that choice ourselves to be gentle, gentle with ourselves and gentle with the person we're interacting with. So this week, my question that I want to leave you with is, what would gentleness look like for you in the relationships that you are part of? With the person that might live down the hall from you, or the grocery cashier, or a family member, or maybe even a stranger who bumps into you on the street. What would gentleness look like? How would your behavior, your words, be shaped by this, what God has given you and treated you in your own brokenness, in all of our own traumas? I want to close by reading again that passage from Matthew 11, verses 28 to 30. And this time I'm going to read it from the Message paraphrase. Feel free to close your eyes if you feel safe to do that, and just listen as if these are the words of Jesus being spoken to you today. Are you tired? Are you worn out? Burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me and you will recover your life. I will show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me, work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Amen.